So I think it's, for me personally, it's best practice to come up with some type of plan via pseudocode. So the parallel of mechanical engineering would be opening up your CAD program before you figure out all your design parameters, right? It's just bad practice. So here I wrote out some pseudocode. I basically wrote out a plan of what I actually want the program to do. So ideally, I want to create some type of function called a dice game. And when I run this function, I want the following things to happen. So the number one thing I want to happen that's common across basically all games is I want to ask the user if they want to play the freaking game, right? Like, do you want to play the game? And, you know, I'm assuming they'll say yes, right? So, oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted a little drawing. Okay, cool. Anyway, I'm assuming that they say yes. So I'm like, okay, awesome. We're all set. This is a printout. And we're going to ask them to enter some information about player 1, player 2. So please enter player 1 name. They input player 1 name here, press enter, and then we go down to the next section. I'm going to ask them to enter player 2's name. So once that's all inputted and stored in the system, player 1 name here, and player 2's name, we're going to commence a dice game. So for this particular dice game, what I want to do is I want to run 3 simulations of a dice roll. So best 2 out of 3 games wins. So I want the printout to say something like awesome, commencing dice game simulation. Best 2 out of 3 games wins. And then here I'm going to run some type of dice game, right? And then below this is the printout. So I want to, for example, I want it to say player 1 won game 1, you know, player 2. Of course, these aren't going to be the actual player names. I'm going to code this so that actually displays the actual input name, but this is a syntax in Python for that. So player 1 won game 2, blah, 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 draw for game 3, right? And after that, I want to compare the results of these games, and I want to pick a person that, you know, the overall winner. So I want to say player 1 is the overall winner. Congratulations. And at the very end, I want to ask the players if they want to play again. In the next section, I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the pseudocode, an example of the pseudocode, and then we're going to jump right into Pycharm, and I'm going to show kind of the algorithm I used to execute all these little instructions. So next section. Anyway, we're going to ask the user if they want to play a game, right? So obviously, we are going to, okay, let's see, okay, all right. We're going to ask the user for input. So for example, in Python, this is how you do it, input, do you want to play a game? And obviously this is super simple stuff, right? This is like ridiculously easy, but I'm just, you know, laying the foundation for what's to come. You know, I missed a bracket. That'll mess you up big time. Anyway, there's supposed to be a bracket there. But if you think about it, we want to take this data in, we want to put it into different categories, right? So we want a yes, right? Because they want to play a game, we want to run the simulation. If they don't want to play the game, you know, we want them to enter a no and for it to just terminate the entire sequence, right? So let's just use our little brush here. Use green because I like green. So one option is gonna be yes. Oh man, look at that skills. Okay, and we execute. One is gonna be no, and then we terminate. And this just runs an entire program. Man, I just can't. All right, let me just do this. So we don't like green. Oh boy. Okay, good. So here we ask them if they want to play a game. Yes, we execute the entire program. At the very end, yeah, basically we just. So yeah, we got 2 options here. Yes, the player enters yes. We execute the entire program. No, we terminate the program. But what if they enter something that's, you know, not yes or no, right? We have to have an option for that. They enter data that's not a yes or no string, right? So we're gonna have a third option that will display some type of input. For example, invalid entry. Please enter yes or no, right? And it's going to keep on asking them questions, this question, as long as they keep on inputting something that's not a yes not a no. So looking at the functionality of this, obviously we're going to have here, especially for this part, we're going to have some type of while loop or for loop. It'll bring us kind of back toward this sequence so we can start the yes again. No, it's going to be a no. We're basically going to terminate the program. Yes, if we say yes, obviously we're not going to loop that yet. We're going to execute the entire program, but at the very end of our program, we're going to have to go back to the very beginning and we're going to ask them if they want to run the sequence again. So obviously we're going to have maybe obviously a while loop here, possibly a while loop at the very end of our yes sequence. So this is kind of my thought process when it comes to doing it. I kind of build it from the top down in regards to functionality. And after you're done building your software, you can go back and kind of play with it a little bit and make it more streamlined and efficient. You know, it doesn't really matter if it's super pretty. I mean, it should be kind of pretty. It should matter if it works. Functionality and working is the most important thing, I feel. You know, it is a pain in the ass to have super disorganized code and to not to comment anything and to leave a nightmare for your coworkers and whatnot, but most important thing, it actually works. So now I'm going to go ahead and jump into Pycharm and kind of code this thing out. So I'm going to define something. Well, of course, I'm going to call this little note here that says making a dice game. You know, you gotta leave comments in your code, right? Best practice. Okay, so I'm gonna call something called make a function called dice game, and can't forget that little colon there. And again, back to our little PNG we made, we have to ask the user for some input, right? So we're gonna ask. This is how you. I'm gonna call this variable user input. Is going to store the input of the user. In Python 3 or Python, this is how we ask for input of a string. So we're going to ask if you want to play a game of dice. So do you want to play a game of dice with a partner? Okie dokie. And that's what we want to input there. Actually, what I also want to do is maybe say best 2 out of 3 wins. So best 2 out of 3 wins. And the \n in Python, what that basically does is just creates another like paragraph. So we can actually we can't. Sure, we might as well print this out. I'll show this. I think everyone is kind of familiar with this does. I'm just gonna print this out anyway and show you how this works. Okay, and then we're gonna go down here and run dice game. Run dice play, right? So this is what it's going to print out here in our little display window here. Do you want to play a game of dice with a partner? Best 2 out of 3 wins. So like I said, this is fairly elementary stuff, but it's really good to kind of understand how all these basic Python things work, especially when you're making a simple program like this. So anyway, we asked our user for some input. Now we got to structure our input. Again, like I mentioned before, we have three types of things that can happen. Okay. Oh, I forgot something. Enter yes or no. Okay, good. I almost forgot that. So what we have to do is we have to create. Again, we have 3 types of data that can be inputted into our system: yes, no, or something that's not yes or no. So while this is what I did, this is the best. I think the best way to do this. While user input does not equal the string no, we're going to run our program basically, right? So, but again, we have 2 types of input. That if it's not no, it can be blah blah blah, something random, or it can be actual yes, right? So if user again input equals yes, we're going to run program, right? Okay, ooh, this is acting weird to me. Okay, good. And then what we're going to do at the very end is user input is equal to, because we want to roll this again, correct? We're going to say user input is equal to input. Would you, forgot, would you like to play again? So basically this is the entire program, if the user only inputs a yes, we'll just keep on looping this and looping this and looping this, right, using this user input. But of course, a person can enter a yes or something that's not a yes or a no. So else they say something that's not a yes or no. What we're gonna do is we're gonna ask them to input something else again. Let's say that was an invalid command. Please enter yes or no, right? So we're still stuck in this system here. Well, it's not yo. If they enter a yes here, it'll just go to this. It'll run the entire program. If it's a no, well, if it's a no, what'll happen? All right, so if user input if it is no, we're going to print out a statement. Too scared to play. Huh? So we have, well, the input is no longer no. We're going to run our program, right? Remember, proper indentation is really, really important in Python. You're either going to use spaces or tabs. I like using tabs. Makes everything really pretty and super simple. To run a program, we're going to have some type of, these will obviously be functions in here. I wouldn't encode the entire thing, right after this if statement. So we're going to have some type of game simulation. We're going to have some type of printout of that game, of the results of that game information. And then we're also going to ask the user if they want to loop back to the beginning and play the entire sequence again with new players. They don't enter that information, right? Else, we're going to tell them that that was an invalid, oh boy, invalid, cannot type right now. We're going to tell them that that was an invalid command. We're going to ask them to enter yes or no, or we're going to stay in this section. If they enter, ooh, I forgot something. There we go. Gotta be careful, All right, so if they do enter a no, we're gonna terminate the program, right, and print too scared to play, huh, loser. So I'm just gonna run this. Let's say, see if I made a mistake. I probably did make a mistake. You never know here. Let's run this and see what I did. Okay, invalid syntax. Oh yeah, there we go. I had this, I'll make this a little bit easier. There we go. Let's run this again. Perfect. Awesome. It's so easy to totally get screwed up when you forget like semicolon, colon, a apostrophe, whatever. But now let's move on to the next section where we code these things. We're going to code our actual dice rolling simulation, and we're going to code our printouts. Because all this is the entire skeleton of what we're trying to do. This is basically done. So let's move on. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and explain the rest of the game. I'm not going to write all this out in real time. I'm just going to kind of explain what I did. So the first thing they want to do is create a simulation that randomly chooses a number 1 through 6. This is going to represent our dice roll. So we're going to import random, and we're going to define a function called random. And we're going to create a variable called dice roll that returns a randomly picked value from 1 through 6. So this random.randint is a good one to use for this. So this guy returns a random integer n such that it's inclusive between A and B, right? So we're going to then return that value, dice roll, and return is pretty cool because basically return just pops us out of the function and returns whatever value we want, right? Next thing we want to do is we want to play 3 games, right? We want to simulate 3 dice games. So I have some variables I created here. Rounds, we're going to start at 1. And we're going to have score 1 is going to be empty list. Score 2 is going to be empty list, right? And basically, score 1 is just going to include the random value of each dice roll. Like for example, for the first roll, we might get a 1 here. Second roll, we might get a 3. We don't really know. But anyway, we're going to create a function called rolling dice. And while the rounds are not equal to 4, remember we're playing 3 games, starting at basically round 1. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, and once it's 4, it's just going to stop, right? It's not going to run the 4th. So because this is a list, we can append to that list using append function or using append, right? So for score 1, we're going to append the random, we're going to run the random function and store that into score 1. And then the same thing for score 2. And what's kind of interesting here is that some of you may be thinking that it'd be easy to just, instead of having two functions here, right, we could maybe combine those two into one function. And that would be really great, but one thing I ran into trouble with, and in Python while doing this, is that, for example, if we put this dice roll function in here, right, let's say we put it like, right here. What Python is going to do is it's going to run this and store that value. For example, what if you picked 1? It's going to store that value 1, and then it's going to run this while loop. And we're going to access, for example, this wouldn't be random, this would be like dice roll, right? Because we're referencing a function here, it's no longer a function. We're using that dice roll value, but that's not going to change for each score, right? So we want this random function to be ran independently independently each time for each score, right? So that's why I created two separate functions, because when we run this function here, we get a separate value than when we run this function there, right? All right, so we got that out of the way. Now I'd say probably most of the most challenging part of this entire code would be the keeping score part. So we have two lists here that have the roles for each player. Now we need to create two lists that keep track of the score, right? So if a player wins one game, we compare those two values, import that value into our empty list here. So we're going to define a function called keeping score, right? We're going to run this after we do after we run the rolling dice function, right? Because this is our main game. I should say our main framework for the game. So rolling dice, now we're going to work on the keeping score part. All right, so this is where we ask the people for all the strings. So A equals input, please enter player 1's name, please enter player 2's name, right? Then we're going to print out, this is what I wanted to print out. Whenever we're going to print out, now we can start the game. Best out of 3 games wins, and we're going to start a new paragraph. So we have the two separate lists. The score, we have a score in each list, or a value for the dice roll in each list. We need to compare the values in each list to see who is winning each game, right? So easy way to do this for a simple list is to use a simple for loop. So here I did for I and j and zip score 1 and score 2. So basically zip, it can combine lists together, right? So this is one part I kind of struggled with initially when it came to for I and j and blah blah blah, right? And whatever have you, right? Is when I was initially doing this, I'd do something like this: score 1, let's say I. This is really incorrect. Like what you need to realize is what I was doing, and it was super wrong, is that you don't need to specify the index value because you're already doing that in here. So for I and j and zip score 1, score 2, I is just going to be that 0th index. It's going to be that first value. This I is actually that first value in this zip together list for score 1, right? So you don't need to reference using parentheses or brackets here. It's just if that value I is bigger than j, right? So if I is bigger than j, we're going to print the player's name, right? We're referencing this input here. So this player, let's say their name's me. So Jacob won game 1 with a roll of whatever that roll is, I, right? We're referencing that value, right? And remember, indexing in Python starts at 1. So for the first game, the index is going to be 0, right? Score 1.index, we're accessing the index value of score 1, which is going to be 0. We're going to add a 1, so that's game 1, right? So Jacob won game 1 with the roll of, who knows? I haven't ran the function yet. Let's say it's just a roll of 3. The other person roll a 1, right? So we're going to append this value here, player.1, right? We can create these brackets for the wins of each player. So player.1, append, we're going to append a value of 1 because I won, for example, this player 1 won 1 game, so we're going to append 1, right? Else, player 2 wins. Same story. I'm going to append a value of 1 for 3 games. And if one number's not bigger than the other, the numbers have to be equal. I can't think of any other alternatives to that. So if no one wins anything, I'm just going to have this printout statement. No no win, not Wayne, no win for game number, whatever game number that is, right? So technically at this point we could be totally done with our program. Like we could just run it and we could see that player 1 won a certain amount of games, player 2 won X, Y, and Z number of games. Maybe there's a draw, but that's not something I really wanted to do for the keeping score function. I wanted to print out something that would give a value, or that would print out who the overall winner was, right? So we do that by comparing the length of the list, or comparing the lengths of player 1 and player 2. So like I said, these guys, player 1 W, that's just a player 1, how many times they won, right? So if the length of player 1 is equal to exactly the length of player 2, remember indentation here, we're going to print out there's been a draw, right? Else, elif, right? Player 1, the length of player 1 is bigger than the length of player 2, we're going to print out player 1, or sorry, their name is over a winner. Congratulations. And if that's not the case, if the length of player 2 is bigger, we're going to print out, no, player 2, their name, right, is over a winner. Congratulations. Okay, so this is basically rolling dice function, keeping score function. I will then kind of demonstrate how this works. Let me just run this program really quickly. So again, we're running dice game down here. We're running our function dice game. And it asks us for user input. Okay? And you want to play game of dice, but 2 through wins, enter yes or no. So I forgot to mention this, but I'm using a dot lower on this data, because what happens if I enter, if I don't have this, I'll show you what happens actually. This is important to note. Run this. I can enter yes. Oh, it actually worked. Why did it work? What the hell? Hold on. Doesn't make any sense. Yes. Oh wait, am I even ruling? Hold on. I might be running the wrong ruling dice game. Okay, stop and rerun. Let me make sure this is right. Okay, there we go. That was an invalid command. Why? Because we entered all uppercase values, right? Python, it considers uppercase values and lowercase values different. So what's really useful when you're getting user input data is to convert that value into all the same type of font, right? So that's why I use this dot lower function. What you could also do is you could, use it down here, say user input is equal to user input dot lower, right? But I just thought it'd be cleaner to put it up here, Okay, so now we got this, put this lower back. I'm going to run this again, and I can enter in yes, and it'll say, okay, yes, you want to play the game, right? Please enter player 1's name. I'll just say Jacob, right? Please enter player's two name. We're going to say Josh. Okie dokie. Now we can start the game. Best out of 3 wins, right? Because it wasn't a no. We inputted yes. So it's going to roll rolling dice function, and it's going to roll the keeping score function, right? So this is a printout. Jacob won game 1 with a roll of 4. Jacob won game 2 with a roll of 5. Jacob won 3 with a game roll of 5. Wow, I won all these games. Interesting. Or sorry, Josh won a game 3 with a roll of 5. The J names are too similar. So Jacob is the overall winner. Congratulations. Would you like to play again? Yes or no? So would you like to play again? Yes or no is, again, this user input here, right? So you're rolling dice, then keeping score is ran, then user input is ran, right? So I can enter no here. And it says, no, really, goodbye, you little sorry loser, right? Because this is no longer yes, right? So it's like, oh crap, no longer yes. What other values? What other things happen when it's not yes? So we go over here to no, right? Sorry, this whole thing runs when it's not no, right? So if it's not no, it's going to come down here, and it's going to find the value for when the user inputs no. It's going to print out, no, really, goodbye, you little sorry loser, or whatever you want, something cute and funny like that, right? So this is what you get when you print no. So again, you see this while loop here. This is really important here. So the user input for the while loop is right here. This is what allows our game to go on and on and on and on right here, this guy. So I'm going to say, you can, let me say, I'm just print yes again. Jacob, let's just say Kim. Kim won game 1 with a roll of 5. Kim won game 2 with a roll of 3. Jacob won game 3 with a roll of 4. So Kim's overall winner. Congratulations. Would you like to play again? Enter yes or no. Right? Yes. Again, please enter player one's name. So yeah, this is basically the entire program in a nutshell, like top to bottom. It's actually pretty simple. I got a little bit stumped for this keeping score part, but once I got this part figured out, it's basically you're figuring out the values in a list and you're comparing them. But yeah, it was pretty straightforward. Like, I highly recommend doing a project like this for fun. You know, like, I'm getting more into learning about data now, but creating games is just super fun to play around and create something that does something cool, like a dice game, you know? So what's also something cool that you can do is you could also, like, you know, import like Pygame into here and create really cool graphics that'll go along with your game. I might do that later. You can also what's also pretty cool is you could potentially upload your game onto a very simple website and have it run from your laptop. I believe you can do that using simple like HTML, CSS for the styling. And there's something called Flask you can use, which is super fascinating. But yeah, like the amount of things you can do with this is just pretty remarkable. The amount of things you can do with the Python 3 program.